The Ars Armor CPC Mod 1 plate carrier has suddenly become the best armor in the game overnight due to one small change. You might well be thinking, how is this possible? Didn't you say that this one was bad before? Well, yes I did, and that is what makes this switch up in armor even more surprising. But it does take a bit of explaining, so here we go. On Thursday the 13th of June, BSG updated and buffed quite dramatically Tarkov's armor system, with the two most important elements being the increased hitbox size for plates and, for the front plate specifically, bespoke adjustments that protect both the collarbone and the armpit area at chest level. This is going to be important later. From Nikita's teaser on Twitter, we got a sneak preview of the actual hitboxes involved here, which are all much bigger of course compared to how they were before, but also include these new elements where there was previously no armor at all. This section under here is the dreaded armpit hitbox, notorious because it connects directly to the thorax's 85 HP pool and can cause you to drop dead from, say, a single shotgun slug or 2 shots from anything with over 43 damage. Now, if we remember back to the beginning of patch 14 and the origins of the armor plate system, the upper body is now split into 3 broad sections. The uppermost part is unsurprisingly the thorax, the middle section is the stomach, and the lowest part is the groin/buttocks. The 2 lower sections both send damage to the stomach HP pool on our PMC, and the uppermost section to the thorax HP pool, which is the sensitive one as you die when it hits 0. Both the upper thorax and the stomach are themselves split into 4 hit detection zones on your PMC, front, back and 2 sides, whereas the lowest section is just front and back, which is groin and buttocks respectively. It's critical to note that, up until this update at least, it was not possible to protect the sides of the upper hitbox at all with any armor, which is what we commonly see referred to as the armpit because this is often what shows up on the death screen. From a hitbox perspective, this is really just thorax side, but as no armor protects it specifically, we never get to see a label attached to it in the armor menu. So, armed with Nikita's hitbox graphic, testing the new armor system quickly shows the most obvious change, which is that the front plate now extends around the arm in a circle. A strap section over the top is now included, as well as the strip between the regular front plate and the side plate to cover the armpit area, and then an extra section that sits between the back plate and the arm. I don't feel that the graphic does this full justice because you can shoot all sorts of places on the shoulder, from behind, just above the side plate. All of these hit the front plate collider, which determines whether a plate has been hit or not. I was expecting to be able to get through to the thorax under the arm still in some fashion, but this appears not to be the case at all. In fact, it seems to be so tightly integrated into the PMC's own hitbox model that the only place that I was able to sneak a shot through to the thorax HP pool without interacting with the front plate was right here, between the front plate and the newly added armpit section, but this is very slim. Too far to the left and you hit the regular front plate collider. Too far to the right and you hit the new armpit protection strip. You need to get it just right in the middle of the two, and there's no great visual guide for it either, so in practice it's extremely unlikely to get shot. In my example, you can see that here the plate takes no damage, but the soft armor does behind. Let's take a step back from the testing for a second. There is more to get into, but the ramifications of this first finding are absolutely massive. Ever since the armor change that came in with patch 14, I have split our armor choices into 3 broad types that take replaceable plates. First, we have the plate carriers like the Hex Grid. These have no soft or aramid armor of their own at all and rely purely on replaceable plates for protection. When these plates are inserted, these protect the front, back and side plate colliders specifically, and this collider is its own entity in the world. These sit outside of your PMC. You can see on the graphic that these plate colliders protrude from the PMC's own hitbox model, and that is true, which we will see a little bit later. Historically, pure plate carriers were absolutely horrible to use in Tarkov because they left large portions of the actual thorax hitbox unprotected. Now though, it's practically impossible to get a bullet in there without going through the plate collider first. This is an enormous buff to these armors, as you aren't giving yourself the armpit experience from the front anymore, which is basically how it used to be. Secondly, we have the standard type of armors like the Thor Concealable, which have soft armor and replaceable plates. Not only do you benefit from the plate colliders, but the soft section on these is assigned to the hitbox areas on the PMC directly. The front plate, for example, protects the area outside of the PMC from the front, and then the thorax soft protection defends the front section of the uppermost hitbox on our actual character afterwards. These two zones are mechanically different, but they work in tandem, stacking with each other to protect you from a bullet. This type of armor used to be the best type, because although the plate collider didn't extend all the way to the edges of the thorax hitbox, you at least had some soft armor that did to prevent wild buckshot and other scav bullets from sending raw damage right into the soft spot. A very important note here is that while soft armor can, but doesn't always, protect the stomach area from the front, back and sides, at best it can only protect the upper thorax from the front and the back. This goes back to what I was saying earlier, that no armor historically has ever been able to cover the armpit hitbox, and for soft armor this is still true. So enter armor type 3. Plate carriers, again with soft armor, but this time there is a subtle difference. The soft armor isn't allocated to the thorax hitbox on your player, instead it's applied to the front and back plate colliders themselves. You might start to see where I'm going with this now, but in the past, these armors were also junked as useless. When the front plate didn't extend across the whole chest, although there was technically soft armor of some kind behind it, this was still leaving a gap around the edge with no armor on the PMC's actual thorax hitbox. This left you super vulnerable again to the same kinds of things, shotgun slugs and the like, but, and this is where the big change comes in, this is no longer the case. As we saw, the front plate collider now not only extends across the entirety of the thorax's front hitbox, barring one minor sliver, it also goes under and around the arm too. Because of how these special carriers are set up, the soft armor underneath just blindly follows the front plate collider wherever it goes, which after the update now suddenly extends all over the place and gives protection from both the plates and the soft armor across almost the entire thorax hitbox, even from the side. This is something that doesn't happen on my so-called standard armors because the soft armor is missing in the armpit regions. Armed with this knowledge, we can cut a short list of armor of this type. There are in fact 11, which I'll put on the screen here. Of these, 5 have no side armor whatsoever, nor the ability to add plates there, which given the increased size of these is probably a mistake. This leaves 6 possible armors, 4 of which have Aramid at class 2 and 2 of them which have Aramid at class 3, but of these the CPC mod 1 is generally better. Higher durability, craftable in the hideout, better internal layout, lower weight versus the precision CPC, which has to be gotten from Knight himself, although it can be found on the flea these days. The only thing the precision really has going for it is 1% better ergo penalty, but that's because it has no debuffs at all, whereas the CPC mod 1 has a simple -1% in the ergo department, which is certainly not a deal breaker. On that basis, I do think that this armor has become the best in the game overnight. Don't get me wrong, all of the armors with replaceable plate options have been given an extreme buff, primarily due to these new front plate areas which cover a much larger area than you might expect. But the greater soft coverage on this type of armor gives this one an edge. I don't want to pull too many simulations here, but just to give you an idea of the benefit we're looking at, against M855A1, having class 3 underneath a class 5 plate versus nothing at all, you can expect to take 1 extra shot to the thorax before dying. These numbers are from Tarkov Gunsmith and still work post-patch as far as I can tell. I did test a couple just to make sure, and I don't think BSG changed any of the calculations. 1 extra shot is sometimes a big deal, and once you take into account misses, arm and stomach hits, etc., so if you can have it, well, why not use it? There is one downside to this collider-only armor, which is the extra stomach area on show with no armor at the front. The new front plate area, while physically higher on your PMC, which protects the thorax better, now only protects about halfway down the stomach hitbox, and this leaves you open to shotguns and high flesh cartridges. With one of the standard armors, you'd still have soft armor down to at least the bottom of the stomach, which is a bit lower. However, even that doesn't totally fix it, because remember that the groin is another stomach area and requires a specific armor like the Karun to protect it. But given that the stomach only passes through 105% on hit when black these days to the rest of the body, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Before we move on to the rest of the testing, you might have noticed that this armor doesn't have any neck protection. Indeed, none of the armors in this category do. My current thoughts on this are, because you can only typically get class 3 to protect this area at best, if you get hit by a player in the throat, you're basically dead already. Ammo like M855 already goes right through class 3 most of the time, and with this armor change, I think we will see players up their pen on ammo in general where possible to deal with the new extended plate hitboxes. This hasn't been as necessary this wipe so far because you could hit around the plates on the thorax and win that way, but this armor change has made it much more necessary to actually beat the armor itself in order to get to the thorax, outside of headshots of course. This whole system does have dramatic implications for ammo balance, especially around access, but that's kind of for another time. On a related note, I believe that it is less likely that you'll get hit in the throat now than it was before. These new plate colliders are very wide, to the point that they stick out invisibly from your PMC quite a lot. Sadly, I don't have a test before the change was made to compare, but as you can see on the graphic, the angle at which the plates sit means that you might hit the top of the plate more often rather than directly into the neck. This is certainly observable from below, where a clear headshot can be seen to hit a plate instead, preventing the wearer from death that, using your eyes, seemed inevitable. The angles involved here aren't so extreme as to cover it completely, but I'm fairly confident that it will have an effect at least. This begs another question. If the hitboxes protrude so much from the PMC's visible model, how much wider is our actual hitbox versus our expectations? Firing a few shots at both of these locations shows that the PMC's front-to-back hitbox at its edges is something like 30% wider than the visual model. At first, this seems like it could be a major issue, but it's important to remember that the plate colliders are actually separate from our PMC. This means that if you get shot from the side and only plates are in the way, the plate gets damaged, the bullet continues out the other side, and our PMC actually remains untouched. I tested this a couple of times, and you can get a getting hit response from a PMC so long as the plate still has durability, even though it causes them no damage. But as soon as the plate hits 0, the hitbox stops being interactable, so this actually works pretty well. Throwing back to what we were looking at before with the CPC Mod 1, because the soft armor is allocated to the plate hitbox 2, you only stop interacting with the extended collider here once both the plate and its associated soft armor piece have both hit 0. Typically, the plate will hit 0 first and then the soft armor second, partially due to the aramid material being so much more durable in general and the fact that the soft armor gets hit second. One strange outcome of the testing was an idea that stemmed from the capsule-shaped hitbox of the upper arm. Where this connects to the upper thorax cuboid, there's a bit of space, and indeed in game, we actually saw an area of the upper chest that was unable to be hit, despite really looking like it should. The other one is that now all the plate hitboxes are the same on every armor, short armors like the Thor protect with the side plates much more than they look, and those like the Zabralo less so. The Thor stops bullets lower than its model physically goes down to on a PMC, whereas the Zabralo stops working before the end of its model. This can be a little misleading, so just remember that all the hitboxes are now aligned for everything. If an armor says it protects a thing, whether that be back, right plate, whatever, that is the same on all armors regardless of how they look. So I hope you enjoyed the testing. As usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.